Martin Luther turned out to be no big fan of the Jewish people, but what he introduced into Christianity, Protestantism, had in hindsight a huge positive impact. The church of medieval Europe, going back prior to Protestantism, was very much focused on the notion of creating relationship with God, often at the expense of relationship with man. The Catholic Church of medieval Europe was the biggest player in the feudal system, which was a brutal and oppressive system, which kept the peasants down, stole most of their money from them, kept them in poverty, oppressed them. And the Catholic Church also suppressed the Bible, recognizing that if people were to read the Bible, not that people in medieval Europe could read, but if they were to read the Bible, they would recognize the Catholic Church was an organization that was not even following the tenets of its own faith. Now, we understand in Judaism that proper spiritual relationship is not just between man and God. It's also between human beings and their fellow human beings. And you have to have a balance between both. The Catholic Church was able to only achieve one side of that relationship, the relationship between man and God, but at the expense of relationship between human beings amongst themselves. It did not espouse ideas of social responsibility and taking care of the world and social welfare. It largely neglected and oppressed the masses. When Protestantism came along and reintroduced the Bible and people started to read the Bible, they recognized that the Bible had any number of values and principles which were not being implemented and which had to be implemented. And that the human being was important, and the human being had rights, and the human being had responsibilities. And therefore, Protestantism played a key role in reintroducing man back into the picture, in creating all of what was later to become the revolution of humanism to a large extent, and the whole notion of social responsibility, liberalism in Europe. All of that was largely a byproduct of Protestantism. So in hindsight, what it did was create a balance. It filled in the second part of that relationship. It added in what was missing, not just the relationship between God and human beings, but the relationship between human beings and our fellow human beings. But the big problem is today, if we look back after having gone through 2,000 years since the birth of Christianity until today, we see that the world, at least the Christian world, now understands both parts. Through Catholicism and that first 1,000 years, the notion of relationship of human beings to God. And through Protestantism and what came after, the notion of relationship of human being to a fellow human being, of taking responsibility for the world, of social responsibility. But what it isn't capable of doing and hasn't done until today is to synthesize those two ideas into one working model. The balance, relationship with God and relationship with man. It's sort of a schizophrenia. And the saddest part is today we look at the world, we look at Europe of today in the 21st century. Europe is largely post-Christian and secular. It's lost that relationship with God model. So the Jewish people still have a critical role to play. A lot of groundwork has been done, but the Jewish people's role is to create a working model, to show the world how to take those parts that it now understands separately and combine them together into a working model so that we can truly create a world that is more godlike and more perfect.